Okay, yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, colleagues, and thanks to Dominic Meyer and Marlene Verschier and their colleagues in the Division for Research Development for this joint information session on funding opportunities and funding schemes with Japan. So I'm Scarlett Cornelissen, as Dominic mentioned. I'm the director of the Stellenbosch University Japan Center. If you'll allow me, I'll just this is what I'll be talking about, and then also other colleagues will be talking about this afternoon. I'll just briefly say something about Stellenbosch University Japan Center, and then spend some time talking about the existing landscape for research collaboration and research funding between specifically South Africa and Japan. That is governed to a big degree by an agreement between the government of Japan and the government of South Africa that was signed back in 2003, and that's the Japan-South African Science and Technology Cooperation Agreement. So that's sort of the point of departure for all of the available funding that there is between, especially for science and technology and innovation between Japan and South Africa. We'll do a rundown of the different bilateral schemes that exist under that Science and Technology Cooperation Agreement, and then focus on a number. I think it's sort of the main vehicles for joint research funding between Japan and South Africa. That the calls have been out for a number of, for over different years. The funding schemes were available and calls were made, and there are going to be calls very soon, especially for the bilateral, the JSPS National Research Foundation scheme. And then also one that's known as AJCOR, the Africa-Japan Collaborative Research Scheme. So we'll explain what those are, and the colleagues will explain when the calls will open and what that entails. And then I'll just also at the end briefly talk about other support schemes and available funding that don't necessarily fall under the Science and Technology Cooperation Agreement, but that researchers here at SU might also be interested in, and that might also offer some opportunities for SU researchers. So the Stellenbosch University Japan Center, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, just to briefly outline what our purpose is. We launched in August 2022, so we are a relatively young center. We are located in SU International institutionally, although we work with all faculties, and our mandate is also in relation to well, our mandate is to support the activities of all 10 faculties at Stellenbosch University. As you'll see on the slide on the left, we're active over 4 academic areas: research, teaching, engagement, and mobility. I'll just briefly speak to 2 of those, and the first one is research. So SUJC seeks to facilitate research collaboration between SU researchers and researchers in Japan. And as you see, one way of doing that is to leverage the Japan-South Africa Science and Technology Cooperation Agreement, or to promote it. So this is exactly what this afternoon's information session is all about. SUJC is also going to be involved with its own research and own research projects, but that's a topic for another day. And then in terms of mobility, one of the other 4 main activities of SUJC is to promote the partnerships that SU, Stellenbosch University, has with universities in Japan, and to facilitate bilateral exchanges, and to also make researchers here and our students here at SU aware of these existing mobility programs and partnerships. This map shows where we have our current partnerships with which universities in Japan. We have partnership agreements and MOUs, and it also shows where with which universities outside of that in Japan we are involved with in different research networks and other sorts of networks. So these are also tools for and channels for researchers here at Stellenbosch University in order to access networks in Japan. So I'm not going to talk to this now because I want to spend some time at the end talking in more detail about the existing institutional partnerships that Stellenbosch University has. So moving on to the landscape for research collaboration and for funding opportunities between Japan and South Africa. So I mentioned about the agreement between the two respective governments that was signed in 2003. And so this agreement has been in existence for 20 years now. It signals a recognition of South Africa's science ecosystem and also the importance of collaboration with South Africa. I think that the Japanese stakeholders, South Africa is the only country in sub-Saharan Africa with which Japan has made this agreement. And under this agreement, under this framework, there are intergovernmental there's intergovernmental dialogue, so there are regular channels of dialogue and consultation between South Africa and Japan. And one of that channels is the Japan-South Africa Joint Committee meeting on Science and Technology Cooperation. And so that's a high-level framework for coordinating collaborative activities and coordinating the support for such collaborative research activities between Japan and South Africa. And under the cooperation agreement and the high-level framework that exists, some funding schemes have been put into place. And here on the screen, these are the main funding schemes that exist. And I'm also showing here the main agencies, for example, JST, which is the Japan Science and Technology Agency that works with our NRF, the Japan Society for the Promotion of Sciences that also works with the NRF for a different funding scheme. And then another important agency is JICA, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, which is the development implementer of funding. Not funding, apologies, the implementer of official development assistance, so Japan's foreign aid to all countries in Africa and also beyond. So the JSPS National Research Foundation, JSPS NRF scheme has been in existence since 2005, and Dominic will say something about that now because the call for that is coming out. I can just briefly mention, so that is a funding scheme supporting bilateral or collaborative research. It's funded both by JSPS, Japan's Society for the Promotion of Sciences, as well as the NRF, and it covers all fields of research. In 2008, an MOU was signed for the Japan Science and Technology NRF scheme, or for collaborations between JST and the NRF. And out of that came a funding scheme known as AJ Core, the Africa-Japan Collaborative Research. And that is a scheme that brings together researchers from South Africa, one researcher from South Africa, one researcher from Japan, and then a third researcher from another African country. So it's a trilateral framework. And we've got Dr. Nazreen Peer. She's currently a holder of an AJ Core grant, and she will talk about her experience with applying for that grant, and also the project that she received grant funding for. And then briefly, as I mentioned, beyond these bilateral schemes, there's the foreign aid or the official development assistance funding that's coordinated by JICA, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, and JICA is a big agency. And then also a few others. I will also then mention something you can see there's SATREPS. SATREPS stands for the Science and Technology Research Partnership for Sustainable Development. And that is a big funding scheme for not only between Japan and South Africa, but for the whole world. And that one is administered by JICA. So Dominique, we'll say something now about the
yes. So we have two funding opportunities through the NRF coming out this year. The SA Japan JSPS joint research proposals, which will open in July of this year, and then it covers social sciences, natural sciences, and humanities. And you need to have a South African HDI partner. We will, once the call comes out, we will send the call through the distribution list, and we will have more information on this one. So I didn't want to put all of the previous calls information because it might slightly change. So we will update it as it comes out. And then we have the AJ Core, which will be focused on environmental science. And as Scarlett says, you need a South African institution, a Japanese institution, and then another African institution. And you also need an HDI partner for this one. So AJ Core should come out in the next month or so, just to be safe. But we will confirm with NRF, and this will also be sent through the listserv.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. Before you just let me go back to that slide before we talk more about the AJ Core. So the JSPS NRF call, just two things to highlight there. It's that it tends to be for mobility.
Yes.
Yeah. So it tends to support conferences and mobility. And then that requirement that there should be a South African HDI partner, I think that's something
from the NRF.
That's something that I see emerged more recently. It wasn't always a requirement for this particular scheme. HDI is historically disadvantaged institute. So when I looked at the call made by the NRF last year, it was something that was emphasized a lot. So it's not only that you need to have a partner in Japan, but that you need to actually, it's people at HDIs that are eligible for this scheme. But if you're from Stellenbosch University, for example, then because we're not on that list of HDIs. But if you're from Stellenbosch University, then if you work with somebody at the South African HDI, then you can be eligible. And then with AJ Core, this is a new multilateral collaboration framework that was created by the Japan Science and Technology Agency. And as we said, it connects 3 countries, Japan, South Africa, and at least 1 African countries. And then how it works is that the Japanese teams are supported but on the Japanese side, and the South African teams are supported by the NRF. And yeah, it doesn't say here, but I'm not exactly sure how the African partner is supported. But perhaps Dr. Nazarine Peer, Dr. Peer is a current holder of an AJ core grant here at Stellenbosch University, and she is in the Department of Botany. She, I think, received this grant last year. I think it's yeah. But perhaps she can explain more how this works and what her experiences were in terms of applying for the grant. So, Dr. Peer, are you?
Hi, Prof. Yes, I am. Thanks for that. So this is our AJ core team, and you can see we've got Prof. Kajita from University of Ryukyus, and it's myself in South Africa, and we've got a West African partner, Prof. It's not doctor, sorry, it's actually Prof. Jean-Paul, and he is from Cheikh Diop Anta University in Senegal. This has been a bit of a challenge because the funding given to Prof. Fall is not, and we only sort of realized this as we progressed. It was not very certain or promised, really, and it was not a large amount. So often, for one of our workshops, the Japanese collaborators covered costs, and for our NRF workshop in May, unfortunately, Prof. Fall could not attend because there was no funding from his side. So this is one of the challenges that we have picked up. But so far, the collaboration is, we communicate virtually via email and through virtual meetings, and it's been really fruitful so far.
So the funding for Professor Fall was supposed to come from which agency?
From a Senegalese sort of the equivalent of the NRF. It was more government-based. Okay. And he, at the beginning, stated that it was not necessarily set in stone, but it was something that he could try to access.
Does your grant allow for supporting your partner in Africa?
You have to very explicitly ask for that. And our agreement was that each of us would apply for our own funding. And while there would be some cross-funding, so for example, we have some funding to bring a Senegalese student over for an exchange trip, and maybe some funding to conduct some of the lab work for our Senegalese partners, which is still very much on the cards. We do not have funding to, for example, bring down members for NRF workshops or to help them move to Japan for Japanese-based workshops. Yeah.
So maybe you can speak to the project itself, and then I'm sure that there's also interest to find out how did you go about identifying your researchers and how did the application itself work?
Okay, I did include some of this in my presentation as well, so excuse me if there's a bit of overlap. What we essentially needed to do was to survey mangrove biodiversity from as representatives of the continent. So while we know that we can't cover the whole continent, look at Senegal as starting points. Mangroves are generally tropical, subtropical, and temperate. So they extend sort of from Somalia all the way down to South Africa, and from Senegal all the way down to Angola or Gabon. We identify partners further along the coast, so we have more representative samples. And actually, it was Gita who had been in touch with Fall, who suggested that we apply for this trilateral agreement, because he was hoping to target West and East African. We had already been in touch regarding a bilateral agreement, and then we decided to extend it. So basically, I think I will explain this a bit more with a bit more context in my presentation, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Wait, Nazarine, can you just tell me next page, and then I'll change the slide.
Okay. I don't have my would you like me to, can I put up my presentation instead?
We have your presentation, or you have a, okay, no, so sure, if you can.
I have a different presentation.
Oh, okay, okay.
Just
Is that possible?
Of course,
yes. Let me just stop sharing. There we go.
Thanks. Just tell me if you can see my screen.
Where is that?
I've just got it. There we go. Do you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I won't get into, oh, my computer's decided to, won't get into too many details. Just like I've already said, mangroves are quite important along our coastline. And the health of mangroves is also linked to biodiversity. So as you can imagine, this whole project is around biodiversity monitoring. And in South Africa, we've been quite fortunate. We have long-term data sets, and our questions become, what drives mangrove diversity and abundance, and how do we monitor this change? Oh, there we go. We also work with in close partnership with Mozambican colleagues, and specifically at Inhambane Bay. And the questions here are a bit different because there's a lot of community-based management and use of the mangroves. So the questions then become, and these are mostly community-led, how effective are our community management initiatives? So these are questions that we can answer as scientists. And generally, we use traditional survey methods, which are quite costly and time-consuming. You know, we go out and we really have to search, and it doesn't return fantastic quality data. And this is where the eDNA comes in, what we call metabarcoding. So what we do essentially is we collect water samples, and the premise is that species present in or around the water will shed layers of skin, mucus, tissue, scales. We then filter out those particles, and we use extraction kits in the lab to extract and amplify those DNA sequences. So these processed samples are then sent to collaborators in Japan who will sequence them using primers, and they return to us a database of species that was identified from those water samples. And you can see it's quite a simple process of pushing water, in this case, through a syringe. And we call this metabarcoding. That's where we collect the samples and we amplify all the DNA inside it. Now, metabarcoding depends on really well-populated reference databases. And that means that we have to barcode actual organisms. So we have to physically collect these invertebrates or fish or whatever we're working on and generate barcode sequences and upload them to global databases. So this primer development and these databases are internationally managed. And as you can imagine, African species are generally underrepresented. So, you know, while the eDNA methods are it's quite novel, it's quite revolutionary, it's cost efficient, and it can also allow for really good incorporation of citizen science initiatives. One of the major challenges we have is that we do not have African representation in terms of biodiversity. So this concern is from us as well as from our Japanese collaborators who are developing these primers and want them to be applicable globally. And that was how the project came about. So our South African cohort is quite well-rounded as well. It's myself. I'm an expert in zoology. We have Prof. van der Hayden, also based at this university, who is the real eDNA expert. And then Prof. Rajkaran, who's the mangrove specialist. And she is our HDI partner in South Africa. We've also got a few master's students and a postdoc. I won't get into this, except to say that with our master student, we've now already extended our range up from South Africa through Mozambique and to Kenya. So we've got really good coverage already along the East Coast. And then a few benefits from the AJ Core project so far are some joint workshops and field visits, and we've already had 3. The first was in June when I visited the Idiomote Research Station, and we linked up with the Asian core of this project as well. So you can see myself as well as Prof. Fall on the far right at the back. And it was really great just to exchange ideas and to get some some input into our respective projects. Then in Feb, we had an NRF workshop in Pretoria, and I like this picture because it's actually Prof. Kajita, our Japanese PI, who is explaining the South African leg of the project to the team. And it also speaks to the integration and the great communication that we've developed as a team over the last less than a year, actually. And then this month, actually, our master's student, Emma, was in Malaysia, and she got to meet students from around the world and also have some eDNA-specific workshops. And already we have joint publications from these workshops. We've had one published already this year, and Emma is working on one from their current workshop. We present our findings as well at conferences, which is actually how Prof. Kajita and I got in touch, was at the Mangrove and Macrobenthos conference, where he put out a call for international collaborators. I find that the student skill development and knowledge sharing is fantastic, and there's amazing support for this from all collaborators. And then, of course, our main aim, which is to populate this barcode database so that these primers and tools would be widely applicable in our countries. Okay, so just to speak a bit about the application process. First, we actually had a joint project and partnership, and we had aligned outcomes. And I feel like this was a very important first step. I don't think that we would have been as successful if we responded to the call and then tried to identify partners. So we needed the support, and our Japanese collaborator needed local collaborators. As you know, these days we move away from parachute research, and we're big into local collaboration because they want their product to be excellent and to be globally applicable. And it was following this brief outline and establishment of our project that we then decided to identify funding strategies. So we responded to the call on the NRF site, and we each had an application form to fill out. I think the Senegalese application form very closely followed the JST application, so they used the same application form. Of course, the NRF form is slightly different. Now, what was very important we found was the cross-referencing and review. So that means I sent copies of our application to our Japanese and Senegalese PI and vice versa. And that way we just really made sure that our proposals matched, that we were all on the same page, that we had the same expectations and the aims and objectives. What I find really was a huge contributor to success, because I think it was even mentioned in the feedback, was that we had very detailed timelines, detailed student projects, and we clearly outlined the roles of each co-PI. We also used methods that were well established and identified where a method was going to be novel. DRD was really helpful. We liaised closely, and they really ensured that we ticked all the boxes. And I find that feedback from DRD is always good because they deal with many applications, so they know exactly what is expected. Often they have a good idea of what is expected. And then something, once we submitted, it was important that we continued the conversation and the planning even while we waited, and even if the outcome is unsuccessful. And what I mean by that is that our first application was actually rejected, and it was because of a very minor oversight. That's because I did not attach a copy of the JST application. So my lesson here was to always attach more than is explicitly asked, because I feel that often with the NRF, requirements change all the time. So you'd rather get feedback saying, please remove this, or this is unnecessary, than submit something and a document is missing and there isn't the option to then add it in later. It's immediately just rejected. Lastly, a couple of challenges was the difference between application forms. So for example, the JST form required a very detailed outline of impact pathways. We did include this in our application, even though it wasn't explicitly asked for. The lack of student support is a huge challenge, and I think this is just an NRF-wide challenge. So it's not specific to the AJ core program. So currently, Emma's MSc funding application has been rejected. we think, because this was the unofficial advice that we got, there is postdoc funding, and of course we cannot really support foreign students. So my master student Sue in Kenya is working part-time to support herself. And then the aligning of research objectives between countries, we were lucky in that it worked out, that we wanted parallel objectives. Travel restrictions were a bit of an issue, especially considering the lack of Senegalese funding. And then, of course, just the change in exchange rates and costs, which I felt you could build into your budget as a buffer, and that's worked quite well. I think that's it from my side. I don't know if I've missed anything out, Dominique or Prof.
No, thanks. That was very comprehensive, Nazreen. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure there will be questions for you. So if we can leave that to the Q&A part, and I'll just quickly talk through the other funding schemes. But I think the AJ Core one is really an interesting program, which SU researchers should definitely look at more closely. Dominique, is it only in environmental sciences? Is AJ Core?
Based off of last year's
Yeah.
one, yes.
Okay.
But it might change this year. We're waiting for the official call to come out.
Okay, thanks, Dominique. All right, then. So we've discussed the bilaterals and where the NRF is involved, with the JSPS NRF1 and AJ Core, and then I did mention one where the Japan International Cooperation Agency is administering, and this is a big scheme. This is a global scheme. And it comes from official development assistance, the budget for that from Japan. It's called SATREPS, or the Science and Technology Research Partnerships for Sustainable Development. And the research fields are environment, energy, bioresources, disaster prevention and mitigation, and infectious diseases control. So it's relatively comprehensive, and it's funding for projects of 3 to 5 years, and budgets can be up to $800,000 per year per project. So these are really extensive. It's a really extensive funding scheme and also comprehensive funding. In Africa, a number of different institutions across the African continent have received support under SATREPS in the lifespan of SATREPS, so up to 44 projects since 2008. And then with South African researchers have also received support under the SATREPS scheme. Currently, there are 2 SATREPS funded projects with South African researchers. There's the development of a carbon recycling system for the decarbonized society by using mineral carbonation, and the South African PI there is based at CPUT. And then the development of new ammonia synthesis systems using renewable energy and hydrogen. So it's a big focus for funding also from Japan. Generally, it's the hydrogen economy. And that project is PI in South Africa is based at Northwest University. So SATREPS is definitely a scheme that I think is also of value for SU researchers. So I'm aware that time is running out, and that we would like there to be enough time for Q&A. I'll just briefly talk about other opportunities for collaboration and for support. The 1 year that I would like to highlight is it's a Japan Science and Technology Program, agency program, the JST program. It's the Sakura Science Program, and basically it's a mobility scheme. It's a program where researchers in the sciences broadly get funding to go to Japan and engage with partners in Japan. We can provide more detail on the Sakura Science Program on the website of Stellenbosch University Japan Center, and also send through that information to DRD if you want to get that information after this discussion. And then just a very brief mention of bilateral development cooperation between Japan and South Africa. Again, this is at the high at the governmental level, but through this, for example, JICA, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, supports various programs and projects, including with universities, vocational training institutions here in South Africa, and also something that SU researchers may want to look at, and that SUJC can also provide more information on ahead. Then lastly, I did mention the exchange agreements and MOUs that Stellenbosch University has with universities in Japan. And at the moment, we've got our current MOUs are with 7 institutions, and the institutions, the names of the institutions are there on the screen. Our active partnerships in terms of student and staff mobility, especially student mobility, is with Waseda University, which is a private university in Tokyo, a comprehensive university. Sophia University is also a university based in Tokyo, and also an important partner, and also comprehensive university. And then Nagoya University is also one of our important partners. Let me say, we our partnerships, we're quite active in terms of utilizing our partnerships. And it's not on a part of the table, but we have a letter of intent to cooperate with Tokyo University of Marine Science and Technology. And then we've just signed, I think, with Hiroshima University an MOU. And then in the future, this is something that Professor Wim de Villiers, our rector, is keen to pursue. It would be an institutional agreement with Tokyo University and Kyoto University as well. Tami, I think you want to, or Lydia Duplessis, who's in the international office, would want to say something about the grants that are available.
Yes, colleagues, and also Lydia, please come through to help. As Prof said, that we do have, as an institutional partner, Waseda University, and if you're interested, particularly to go to Waseda University, you can do it through our research grants, and also Hiroshima University is part of our INU network, which is the international network of universities, and it is possible there also to get training and to collaborate with that university. Lydia, please, can you go through our website of the international office?
Can you share that for me, or are you who's sharing? Sorry. Good morning, colleagues.
Yes.
I'm
Okay, you can share.
Sorry.
Oops.
Or I can share if you. You want me to share, Sammy? Okay. You're on mute, Sammy. I'm sorry.
I'm saying you can proceed.
Okay. So in terms of the options for mobility funding to any of the institutions that we are partnering with, applicants can apply for the International Collaboration Mobility Grant, the one that's on the screen, the IC and NG. We list a number of partners that we will provide preference to, and you will see Waseda University is on that list. However, this is not limited to only these institutions. So you can apply for any institution that you would like to collaborate with, and then you apply for the International Collaboration Mobility Grant, but preference will be given to these institutions on this list. It's basically a travel grant. It's on a sliding scale of 20,000 to 30,000 rand, and that should you are successful, that should be enough for a plane ticket and hopefully a visa application. So we basically try to have a three-tiered approach that we will provide the travel grant, that the the hosting institution will provide or at least support part of the accommodation options, and then that the direct environment will then provide a stipend. The other option, Tommy, if you can just close that. There you go, thanks. The network opportunities that we have specifically for PASS environments through the INU network is the Staff Knowledge Exchange Program. So that is basically a network where we're part of, and then the University of Hiroshima is also part of this network. So basically what it entails, it's a job shadowing experience. It's people or past staff within those environments that can apply. So the long and short, the process is quite well set out on the website, as you can see, but it's the long and short of it is that you apply through the INU network first. So you do an application directly to INU, to one of the institutions. So you list 3 options, and then they will engage with that university to see if they can receive you, and then that university will be responsible for providing accommodation, while the sending university, which is us, will provide the flight ticket. And then again, there's an expectation that the direct environment will provide a stipend or daily allowance. So those are the main ones that we have, and then we've got the Erasmus Plus options, but I don't think that's applicable at this stage. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. Thanks, Lydia. We also got in the chat a comment from Willem, who I think is in chemistry. In chemistry, yeah. And Willem said that he can recommend as a low-hanging fruit the opportunity, the AC21 Academic Consortium, because he got funding through that initiative to organize a joint symposium at Stellenbosch University. So that's we part of that network with Nagoya University. So if can you speak to the AC21 consortium?
Unfortunately, I don't have all that information. As far as I know, the AC21 was concluded, the consortium as such. I can just find out because my colleague Kevin Adams is the main coordinator for that, and he actually works with the funding which Willem refers to here. So I'll just confirm about that. But as far as I know, it has concluded. As far as I know. That was sort of the last round. Yeah, but I will just...
Sorry, Lydia, you can go.
No, sorry. I just want to say that's how I have it, but I will double check my facts, and then I will send the information through to you, Scarlett.
Yeah, thanks. I've heard that there's some funds left over, and there might be an opportunity to use those funds through the consortium, and you know, our researchers, our SU researchers can also then access those funds. So it's yeah, even though the consortium has come to an end, the funding still exists there. And then I also just want to mention that SUJC hopes to be able to provide mobility support. So support for MA and PhD and perhaps also senior undergrad students in all subject areas to attend conferences in Japan and to present at those conferences, and also to go and engage with partners in Japan. So SUJC at some point will also be in a position to give additional mobility support. So we're at the end of our presentation. There's just the one slide where we put up the contact details of the persons that can direct you to more information. Now it's also an opportunity for you to ask some questions. I think that there were some very useful tips that Dr. Nazreen Pier gave, because that's one of the big issues, especially working with the landscape in Japan, is about how to identify partners and how to access the network in Japan. And as Nazreen gave a very important hint, actually, it's working through our existing scientific networks. So, for example, going to conferences or the AC21 consortium or the International Network of University Networks, that those are useful channels to know a little bit about the environment in Japan academically, and then also to identify researchers with similar interests as you to then start a collaborative project. But are there other comments or questions from the attendees? Yes, so Professor Nyasulu, we can make the slides available to you. Yeah, and is Ashraf?
Yes, hi. It's Ashraf Kaji here from the Department of Psychology. Look, I've been interested in working with Japanese colleagues for a long time, but I've had a bit of trouble identifying potential research partners. So one of the things that I study and I'm interested in is post-traumatic stress, and for example, given the natural disasters that have occurred in Japan and the various issues related to post-traumatic stress in South Africa, I thought, this would be something to be able to investigate using one of these mechanisms. There are a couple of problems that I've encountered. One is the websites of the universities are usually in Japanese, and they are not, I guess they are not comprehensible. That's the one thing that I've kind of stumbled with. And the other is I suppose the opportunities that come up, the window of opportunity to apply to identify a potential partner and then jointly apply for one of these bilateral opportunities. The time frame is quite limited, so I've never actually been able to get my act together in time to submit one of these applications. I've submitted various other applications for other opportunities, but this one has just been not very easy to navigate. So I just thought I'd give that bit of feedback. If this network can be helpful in firstly identifying collaborators, and then secondly, I guess facilitate the process, that would be quite useful. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ashraf. Yeah, so that's something that ECJ, the Japan Center, can do, is to put together some information that we make available on our website, and in specific fields where potential collaborators can also be made known, or we can engage individually with you, for example, as the SU researcher, and try to help you identify collaborators. I can really think of some people in Japan that are doing exactly what you, so colleagues of mine in Japan that are doing exactly what you are interested in. So you and I can engage offline at some point. I just want to reiterate Nazreen's point about conferences, trying to identify people at conferences that you attend. And then your point about the websites being in Japanese, that is a challenge. You get tools like Google, not Translate. Yeah, but you get the app on your cell phone where if you hold it over the text, then it translates it for you. So even doing something like that. But translation services is also we can put you in touch with the translator. Then speaking to your point about the window of opportunity to apply, I don't know if Dominique wants to say something about that.
So we send the call out as soon as we get it from NRF. We have been trying to get it earlier, but the NRF's gonna NRF. So we are completely dependent on NRF when it comes to when the calls come out and the application closing dates. I mean, we do try and see what we can do.
Yeah, but again, I think Nazreen's experience that she shared with us, it's also quite useful because I think first of all you need to have a longer planning cycle, so not just wait for a particular call, but maybe work up to 1 year or 18 months in advance. You have your concept, you have your collaborators lined up. And her point was also important in terms of aligned outcomes, that you know what you want out of your out of your own research interest, aligning that or matching that with the researcher in Japan, and then giving yourself ample time to develop the proposal. So that by the next call that comes in the following year, that you are well prepared to submit your proposal. So that was the other point about matching. I think that we will engage with DRD to DRD has an overview of researchers here at Stellenbosch University, and we can have an exercise based on that knowledge of trying to match people with institutions and then even individual collaborators. Any other?
I think that'll be a very helpful thing to have some kind of matchmaking event between and Japanese collaborators with shared interests and overlapping, so if that event can take place as a consequence of this conversation, that'll be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ashraf. There are actually in a kind of a more milder form these sorts of matchmaking events and opportunities. The main platform for that is something called SAJU, South Africa Japan Universities Forum, and Stellenbosch will host the next SAJU, which is going to be next year. And then there are also the University of Hokkaido has been working with the University of Zambia for a long time, and they have also a similar kind of matchmaking platform. So we can also make that for matchmaking event. We can make that information also available on our website, and also we have a newsletter. But what am I thinking? The database that we are collecting of SUJC followers. So Tami Maflobo, who's my colleague at SUJC, is working on that. So sending out regular information about these matchmaking opportunities, whether it is SUJC organizing it or that we are aware of, we will send that out also to people who sign up to our database. Okay. Are there any other questions? We will make the slides available to people who are interested. Also, our website, www.son.ac.za/Japan Center. That slide was put up. will also contains information about many of these programs and opportunities that we had spoken about today. So yeah, so please visit that.
Okay, so we just want to thank Scarlett and Tumi for joining us, and then everyone who joined us. If you have any further questions, you can just contact us. Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.